and this is the XP Billionaires podcast. This is all the talk and news for you to gain as much XP as possible. I am Rafe Thegrim, and I have got Sky Knight and Irene Rogue with me. So we'll start with Sky. Sky, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fine.
You seem giddy in the process.
I don't know. I never know how to answer that.
It's like, it's like, how much of my life story should I be telling here?
I mean, you got a minute or two if you got anything. Like, it's all good.
Nope, I'm awkward. Let's keep going.
Right.
I'm awkward. Let's keep going.
All right. Well, we'll move on as per your wishes. All right, Irene, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I know that feel.
Oh, we've all been there at one point or another. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been I can't.
Well, I can. So
Move on.
because somebody's got to run this show.
Move on. If anyone's curious, I'm playing Final Fantasy XII Zodiac Age. Go.
Okay. Well, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm playing Judgment. That's enough said there. And Sky, what are you playing? Nice and quick.
Mostly Dauntless and Seven Scarlet, a Vita visual novel.
Nice, awesome. All right. Well, let's dig into this week's topic. Yay! Stuff to talk about that's not awkward.
What?
Exactly.
Don't worry, we'll make it awkward. It's fine.
This is how our episode is going to be, everyone. I am sorry, and if you've tuned out, I totally understand.
Wow.
Oh, we do.
If you can't handle us at our most scatterbrained, awkward, and unorganized, then you don't deserve us at our best. Good day, sir.
You know, if they've tuned out, they haven't heard that part yet, right?
God fucking damn it.
All right, let's get this crazy train going. All right. All right. Okay, we're gonna dub this the silliest episode on Earth. So, okay, this is worse than me on a sugar and cream filled donut.
No, none of us are plastered to the ceiling.
Not yet.
There wasn't a ceiling at the time. Only
We're
a bus
plastered to a bus shelter.
That is true. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. Okay, so this week we are going to talk about another interesting concept in RPG game design. Something that's not used very often, but at the same time is an interesting method. So it's definitely something worth discussing. So RPGs are always coming up with new and different ways to tell their story. And one of those ways is being able to create a story that can be seen from multiple sets of eyes. So you have games like the Saga Frontier series or Octopath Traveler more recently, which give you the ability to experience multiple protagonist stories, all culminating to one big endpoint. You've also got games like Suikoden 3, where you eventually choose your main protagonist from 3 choices, thus making the story more focused around that character after a certain point in the game. So I wanted to discuss the whole concept of multi-perspective RPG storytelling this week, and I figured we'd have a couple of questions here to go through a discussion for it. Well, the first question that I've got is, what out of our opinions is an RPG that has successfully utilized a multi-perspective system? I'll start with this one because I actually really like discussing this particular game and series, and we know we talked about the series last week, but we're going to do it again because it's just that notable. So sorry guys. For me, a successful game that has done this was Yakuza 4. I honestly had to think long and hard about this because I'll be perfectly honest, out of the games I've played with multiple perspectives, I didn't have a really good answer for one where I had played both or all perspectives in to give you to give a good response. But Yakuza 4 made me play all of the perspectives, and it was just part of the main narrative. And that's one of the things that I think was really good about it. I mean, now I have yet to play Yakuza 5, so, and I know that they're doing a similar thing there. So I don't know if I'm going to like that one better, but for now, this one was excellent. So Yakuza 4 followed four protagonists, and each one got caught up in the same issue, but in a different way. So it did involve everyone meeting up with with each other at some point, and being this unlikely band of brothers standing their ground against a common foe. But it was really well told. Now, not only were the stories very easy to connect and to follow, but each character's story showed another side of life for people who either are in Kamurocho or had lived there at one point or another. For example, you had Akiyama, who basically, after the end events of the first Yakuza game, ended up incredibly wealthy and decided to open up his own money lending agency, his own loan office. But he didn't charge interest. He didn't need collateral. All he asked was that someone pass a test, an unique individual test catered to their situation. If you did, he'd give you the money, no interest, no worries. Didn't care if he got the money back. Making him a really, really interesting character. I really wanted to know more about that. When I did, it was great. And when he got caught up in one person who needed to borrow money, that spiraled him into the situation. Then you've got Saejima, who basically spent decades in jail and got the opportunity to break out. And when he did that, he got involved in a situation that was involving his former partner. And, well, we're not going to spoil who that partner was because that's a really fun bit. Then you've got Tanimura, basically a little honorable yet crooked cop in the Kamurocho PD. And, one of his cases leads him into this whole situation, the whole mess that the story is based around. And then, of course, Kiryu, which you eventually meet. But, he always gets involved because it always has to do with the Tojo clan. And he's always going to be soft on them in one way or another. But you knew this city was different than any other city in Japan. But this game gave you a much better taste of how different it was, in my opinion. And you couldn't do that with just Kiryu alone for this particular storyline, and I think they nailed it when they created these characters, people I had never met before. And while I didn't really care that much about Tanimura, the other two, Saejima and Akiyama, fantastic characters. Yeah, I can't stress enough. I know Akiyama is going to be in the next game, and I really want to see more of him.
Yeah, I think Akiyama was an excellent addition to the cast, and certainly I think the best of the new characters. Saejima, in a lot of ways, was interesting because his particular connections to people we already knew about.
Yeah. You'll learn about Saejima very, depending on what order you play your Yakuza games in, because he's mentioned at the very least in Yakuza 0, because you find out to some extent about how he ended up in jail in that game. But
yeah,
which was nice because it was a nice touch for a game that was made after Yakuza 4. So I really, really appreciated that.
Yeah, it puts more context into a story we already knew about.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting. They this whole thing, like I haven't played it myself, listeners, but I watched Rafe go through it, and the story is expertly crafted. Yeah, and manages to still be very coherent, which I think is important.
If you're going to do it, you have to have that coherence and being able to kind of start piecing the main story together yourself, what connections there are to the underlying plot, trying to find out who the antagonist is, who the big bad is. It was really well done. So I give it big credit for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Sky, what's a successful multi-perspective game for you?
Well, I'm going to go with the aforementioned Suikoden 3. Well, I think the execution does suffer sometimes. I think what makes Suikoden 3 so effective as a whole is that you see the story from multiple perspectives. Simply because the political situation between the Grasslands, Zexen, and Harmonia is so complicated that it would be difficult to get any sort of understanding of it from one perspective, particularly with, a fourth sort of rogue group of villains trying to pit the Grasslands and Zexen against each other.
False
Um,
flags, false flag attacks and shit like that.
in a way, yes. And the thing is that much isn't exactly as it seems in the game. And you, at first, you can maybe think it almost seems like it might be like it's poorly written, they haven't gotten all their facts straight, whatever, until you get to the end of the game. And if you get all 108 stars, which is easier in this game than in any other Suikoden game, it unlocks the true ending of seeing key events from the perspective of the main villain.
Hmm.
And it locks all the pieces in place. You go like, that's what that was. That's why it didn't make sense, because you may have seen an event occur as Hugo involving Chris, but you didn't see it happen when you were playing as Chris.
Mm.
So there's these disjointed bits in the early game that make you go like, what the hell is going on? And then once you get an understanding of who the true villain is, because that's not even clear at first, and you're not even sure of the identity of the main villain, even once you sort of realize, okay, it's this guy who's running around screwing things up, you don't necessarily understand who that person is until a little bit later. And I'm being deliberately vague because it is one of the biggest plot points of the early Suikoden games. His identity is actually changes your perspective on the initial games.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And some of the events going on and what you assumed about certain people. So the multiple perspectives is absolutely essential to the narrative. And while I don't think it was always done as well as it could, I do think there's a little too much repetition in places. And I mean, there are other parts of the game I like more than others, but I don't think you could tell this story without those different perspectives. This is why I always tell people, even if they're not super thrilled with Suikoden 3 at the beginning, keep going, finish it, because when everything comes together, it's just like, holy crap. It is not only just a massive recontextualizing of what's been going on, but what's been going on in the series. It also showed a very interesting path forward for who the main villain of the entire series could be. It points in that direction, and unfortunately we never got anything more because after Suikoden 3 all we got were prequels.
Yeah.
But very, very interesting, and like I said, impossible without the multiple perspectives.
No, you're definitely right there. Yeah, they created something on a really grand scale, and I love it. I think it was the right choice to give us from extra protagonist options. But okay, and Irene, I think you might have a different bit of point of view here. But what kind of success stories do you have with multi-narrative?
None. Not really. Not when everything's all said and done. So I'm gonna just come out and say it. I don't like multi-perspective storylines. I find that they always fall short in one way or another. I've yet to see one that's done. I've yet to see a multi-story, like a multi-perspective game that couldn't have been more effectively and impactfully told without the use of multi-perspective. So my case in point, and I still like these games, like Tales of Xillia. I love Tales of Xillia. It didn't do too bad a job, but the multi-protagonist perspective was actually, it didn't need it. It just didn't. And it was all or nothing. Once you picked, you couldn't switch perspectives ever in the game. You had to play through the whole thing as either Jude or Mila. And if you picked, and the game presents these two options as completely neutral, one is just as good as the other. It is not. If you don't play Jude first, you miss like 80% of the story. It was written so that you had to play Jude first, but still it was presented as an equal choice. So I did play Jude first, but I thought that it was dumb that it was presented to me as you could play as either one of these people and still get the story. I'm like, not really, no. You can't. There's going to be bits missing. And in fact, actually, I finished Jude's story first, but I actually picked Mila and played for about an hour as Mila first. And the entrance to the story was an in medias race. Jude walks up to her. They've already met. Like, it was bad. It was very poor. That was not a great way to do it. And I think it would have been more effective had they just had one perspective and had scenes with, like, the scenes that were uniquely Mila's perspective just interwoven with the rest of the narrative.
Yeah, like actually switching perspectives within one playthrough as opposed to dividing them up completely separately.
Exactly. So, like, instead of telling it from like a basically third person limited perspective, a third person omniscient perspective would have been much more effective there.
Sure.
Because there were some character motivations that were not clear until you get into Mila's perspective. And it was about Alvin and his motivations. And without it, he just kind of looked like a giant tool bag the whole fucking game. So, I don't know. It didn't necessarily work as well. And then on the other extreme end, you have Octopath Traveler. They had separate narratives, but again, they still tripped over themselves because they ended up telling separate stories, largely independent of each other. So your companions never gelled because their stories were all independent. So there's no relationships in your party to speak of. So it's like, I just find that when they tried, it's like, we're going to give you multiple perspectives for replay value. I'm like, you could have told your story better without this gimmick in a lot of these cases. That's kind of my main complaint with the multi-perspective RPG is that a lot of times, like, Suikoden 3, it seems like they actually had, like, a plan. They had a plan for their narrative, and they figured it would make more sense to split it across the three protagonists until they all meet up together. That makes sense to me. But a lot of times it's just like it's a gimmick that gets added for replay value, and it doesn't necessarily add a ton of, like, it either detracts from the narrative or it adds nothing and just adds confusion. So it's a very rare occasion where you get a multi-perspective RPG that's super successful with it.
No, you're right. I mean, it has to be done just right, or there's no point in doing it. You know, you Suikoden 3, even then, it still had some failings in it. Like choosing your flame champion was, I think, a failing because it didn't, like, especially in the way they mechanically did it, like hiding one major, like, story scene behind having Chris as the flame champion was, I think, a mistake. I would have loved to have seen it from every perspective, every option, but
Yes.
You know what? It is what it is. It's they did it, and at the very least, it still felt like a good, solid game. But you just missed this one very crucial thing.
Yeah.
I think there's something to keep in mind about Suikoden 3 as well, though, is that a lot of its storytelling was hampered by the fact that the translation was crap.
Well, yeah.
So, I mean, yes, that's the whole thing about Chris is completely true. it would have been nice to have seen that in the other timelines. But yeah, one of the reasons why there's some execution issues in Suikoden 3 are particular to the localization. So
That's just another thing too. But like just with the mechanics themselves, I mean, this will bring us right into the next question here, is that, you know, how do you think that this kind of system can fail? I know, Irene, you've given some examples already, and I mean, there's other things we can bring up in the process as well. Like, I have two things here that I think like are really something that are detrimental to this concept. Like, the first part is that like success and failure is all going to boil down to how well the character perspectives are integrated into the main story during the main story, not just how they all come together at the end. So, you would go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go back to Octopath, like we were just talking about. Like, I wanted to like this game. I think everything they did, the retro feel, the beautiful artwork and the backgrounds, everything they did was a great idea. But every time I met a new character, it was just, you're right, it was just their story. I couldn't see where the connection was to all of these characters as I was playing. It was only going to be like at the end where everything might have made sense, but I honestly, I haven't gotten there yet. I struggled to get there.
And because like it didn't know who you were going to have at what time in your party, it was like, oh, okay, well, we don't know who you're going to have, so we can't write in any kind of like story sequence where these two characters like talk, get to know each other. It's like, yes, we are bound. I will travel with you for my own purposes, and we will never speak again.
Yeah, and
It's
it's unfortunate. It really is, because like they did a really, really good job at redesigning a classic JRPG experience. It's just they faltered on this aspect of the storyline, and it's such a shame. It really is. Now, the other thing that for me that I think is a big one here is that when a multiple perspective option is available, but one of those options hides crucial plot pieces, like we were talking about with Suikoden 3. That's a big no-no. That's a big no-no in my book. And I know Tales of Xillia did the same thing, where certain scenes were only available as Mila, like you were saying. It's
yeah, it
like
really
these are
changes your
all,
perspective on a very key character. Like,
yeah, yeah. And if you think about it too, like there have been other games that I've played where you either miss certain things or there's just aspects that you don't get. And I'll get into more of that in a little bit, because I'm going to want to touch up, because I know, Sky, like your answer to this is going to be somewhat connected to what I've got to say there. So let's get to you and ask, like, where do you see that kind of failure?
well, actually, my example is actually quite sort of similar to what Irene brought up. I'm going to talk about Manichemia 2 here. A game I remember almost nothing about because I played Ulrica's side, and of the story, like, you can choose between Reyes or Ulrica at the beginning of the story, similarly to as in Gilia, where you choose between Jude and Mila. I got to the final boss and was really like, this game hasn't started yet. Like, I remember nothing about it because it made zero impact on me. The story seemed just completely irrelevant. And it was one of the few Gust game playthroughs I finished feeling quite unsatisfied with the experience. And that's what it comes down to. Like, if you're going to do multiple completely separate protagonist paths, make them equally relevant.
Yeah, exactly. And this is actually bringing it up into what I was thinking as well. Like, the another game that I saw this kind of happen with was a PSP title called Hex's Force, which I know we both played.
I played a little bit of it too, but I remember absolutely nothing about it.
Oh yeah, I don't remember too much about it, but I played the male protagonist side. Sky, you played the female protagonist side, and like when we compared notes, I clearly had the much better experience.
Isn't that just so ironic? The main story is always told from the male protagonist side, but that's not sexist.
No. But see, here's the thing: is that this is actually something I was going to bring up. Is that they're trying to show you equality, but they're still not giving the meat of the story any type of balance. It's still one-sided. It's still on the male protagonist side. And it was the same with Manakemia too, because I played through Ray's story, and I again, like, I watching you play through your side with Ulrika, and I was just, it's like, wow, you really got the shit end of the stick.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like a whole like 5 hours in Tales of Xillia that you miss if you play Mila's side.
yeah.
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 I honestly could not tell you anything about the plot of Manakemia 2.
No, I don't remember it too much myself, but that's only because I've only played it the once, and it's been a really long time. But
I'm gonna play Ray's side when I go to replay it. I'm listeners. I'm slowly working through the Atelier series again, and it's gonna take me years because there's bloody many of them. But I still have a couple of games to go before I hit Manakemia 2. I've finished Atelier Iris 2, so Iris 3 would be next.
yeah, definitely. All right, Irene, is there anything you want to add based on this? I know we've touched on a lot of things you've mentioned before, so.
I mean, not necessarily, but like the big thing for me was that for the like we touched on it already, but the thing that killed Octopath for me was that the stories just they never really seemed to matter to the other characters. It's like, great, all of these stories are great by themselves, but you're giving me a multi-perspective RPG. I'm expecting them to like impact each other. And for the longest time, they're kept so siloed and wholly separate that it's like I can't I don't understand why you decided to do it this way.
Like, what's the point of telling all these stories?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, at least with what I played from the Saga Frontier games, like each story was more or less its own condensed thing with a connection at the end, which is different from what they tried to do with Octopath. But at the same time, at the very least, they were individual stories.
Yeah, Octopath just seemed like there was a sort of I don't want to say synthetic, but like unnatural division between the protagonists because they're traveling together, right? Like
Hmm.
they're all traveling together. They're fighting like huge battles for each other. And yet they don't even seem to like each other. Like it's really it just feels like it feels weird.
Yeah, and even in the in between traveling, like, I don't know if you got far enough, but there's bits there you can do like side conversations between certain characters at times. So like for them trying to understand one another, but it felt so mechanical, and it didn't do the best job.
It's like we have to like, oh well shit, we should probably figure out a way for this narrative to like string together. So we're gonna put some like cellophane tape like here, and that should hold it together, right? No, it doesn't.
No.
It doesn't.
No.
And for stuff like with other, I find that whenever they split the narrative really hard between two characters, if you pick the wrong choice, often you're ending up with the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
They're not equal, and they don't tell equally relevant stories. It's more like, hey, you've played the often male protagonist side of the story. Now see the bonus content.
Yeah. And that's the other problem with it too. Like, if you pick the short end of the stick, regardless of whose character it is, regardless of any of that, if you pick the short end of the stick, I'm just going to assume that it's going to be just as unsatisfying on the other end. I might not
Yeah,
pick that game up again.
yeah, you're doing your game no favors by doing that. Like honestly, I think Tales of Xillia would have probably benefited from saying like from not giving you an option at the start. It's like, here's Jude's story. You play through Jude's story. Hey, there's some extra shit you could have done from Mila's perspective. Do that,
Yeah.
and here now Mila's perspective's unlocked.
Yeah.
However, I still think like if they had to do two protagonists, that's how I would have done it. But I still think one like they eliminated that for Tales of Xillia 2, and I was really pleased with that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually something they did in Yakuza Kiwami 2, which I thought was actually really cool. As you just got through Kiryu's main story, they unlocked the bonus side story chapters of Majima's story, and you could shift between them at any time, which was really cool. You could just like reload the game and go into it. And like you would get through like once you got through like 3 chapters of Kiryu story, you'd get chapter 1 of Majima's. There wasn't a lot of connection between the two of them, but it at least gave you a chance to switch it up. But you got to see some more of Majima's life that wasn't available originally in the first place, in the first printing of Yakuza 2.
Yeah, that's good. Like that's like a nice little bonus content. Like if you're gonna have like multiple perspectives like that, it either needs to be like very clearly articulated as not a viable choice for a main playthrough. If it's going to not be a viable choice for a main playthrough, and a lot of these games, they don't signal that very well.
Yeah.
So it's like
And
I don't even understand what's happening. What is going on? Why do all these characters seem to know each other? Like what I don't understand, essentially.
Well, and that's one of the things Suikoden 3 did really well, because you have the 3 main perspectives and they're clearly delineated, but you get to a certain point in their chapters and you unlock 2 chapters of Thomas. But it's clearly marked as a sort of side perspective on the wheel where you pick the perspective, and it's only 2 chapters and it's completely optional. So you can do it or not. Doesn't really matter. Clearly delineating importance in the story helps.
yeah, absolutely. You're right. All right. Well, that's now that we've racked our brains about multi-perspective games, let's I want to hear what you guys think about it. So, drop us a line. Let us know what you guys think of multi-perspectives, whether or not we've bashed Octopath, one of the nicer RPGs of the last year or so. But no, definitely send us some info. Let us know what you think about the concept itself. And you can find me on Twitter at BillionairesXP, or you can check me out on Instagram at RaveThegram, or check out my Twitch streams Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, also at RaveThegram. Sky, where can everyone find you?
I'm at SkyKnightXP on Twitter and Twitch. I'm at skyknight.xp on Instagram. And I stream on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Perfect. Irene, where are you going to be?
I'm on Twitter at irogue_xp and on Twitch at irogue_xp at 7 p.m. Thursdays. So we'll come check it out.
All right. And we'll have a transcript of the episode coming up within a few days of our release. That'll be done by our XP Hobo, Hannah Bard, and it'll be available on our website, xpbillionaires.wordpress.com. And do check out the updates we're doing on our coffee page. I know I put up a recent exclusive article on there highlighting one of the streams I just recently did. So we'll probably see some more content like that coming up on there just to keep people engaged on coffee. And if you'd like to send us a donation, please by all means do so right there, coffee.com/xpbillionaires. And if not, please just share our content with your friends. We'd love to get as many new people to talk to as possible about our stuff. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week. We'll catch you all 1 week from today, or hopefully, if you're just binging us, in a few seconds from now. But in the meantime, keep gaming, and we'll see you next time. Take care now.